Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah, and I'm part of the team here at Test Innovators. The focus of today's webinar is how to read your ISEE score report. Let's get started. So to start, I'd like to share a little bit about what we do here at Test Innovators. We've helped over 150,000 students prepare for standardized tests and get into the most selective schools. We've also worked with many tutoring companies, educational consultants, and schools. So today we will be covering how the ISEE is scored, the ISEE score report, how schools use the ISEE scores, as well as some frequently asked questions about the scores. So throughout the webinar, feel free to type questions in the Q&A box. If we have time at the end, I'll answer those questions, but if there are any I don't get to, I'll be sure to email you a response along with the webinar recording. So this webinar is being recorded. I will email out a copy of this recording to all registrants after the event. So if there's anything you'd like to review, you'll get an email with this recording afterwards. And today we're also live streaming on Facebook. So you can also head over to our Facebook page to get a copy of this recording as well. Okay, so before we talk about the score report, it's important to understand how the ISEE is scored. The first step in scoring is calculating a raw score. This is quite simple. Students receive 1 point for each correct answer, no points for incorrect answers or unanswered questions. So 1 point for a correct answer, 0 points for an incorrect answer, and 0 points for an unanswered question. Once a raw score has been calculated for each section, it is converted into a scaled score. This conversion adjusts for the variation in difficulty between different tests. Thus, a lower raw score on a harder test could give you the same scaled score as a higher raw score on an easier test. This process is called equating. Students receive 1 scaled score for each of the 4 sections, which are verbal reasoning, reading comprehension, quantitative reasoning, and mathematics achievement. The scaled score ranges from 760 to 940. Next, the percentile score for each section is calculated. Percentiles compare a student's performance to all other same grade students from the past 3 years. For example, a 40th percentile indicates that a student scored the same or higher than 40% of the students in the same grade, but lower than 59% of the students in the same grade. Finally, the percentile is converted into a Stanine score. Notice that the percentile ranges for the middle Stanines of 4 to 6 are far larger than the ranges for the extreme Stanines of 1, 2, 8, and 9. This means that most students taking the ISEE achieve scores in the middle range. Only the top 3% of all test takers receive a Stanine of 9 on any given section, while 20% of the students receive a Stanine of 5. As you can see, the area here is much larger than the area here. There are 3 main parts to the score report. The student information section. So it's important to look at this information section and verify that the information in this section is indeed correct. There's the test profile section, and then the analysis section. So the test profile section shows the scaled scores, percentile scores, and Stanine scores for each section. You'll also see a Stanine analysis, which indicates your projected Stanine range. And stay nines are really the primary number that schools reference for the ISEE. In the analysis section, you'll see a more detailed breakdown. Each section is broken into question type, and to the right, the plus signs and minus signs, which indicate which questions were answered correctly and which questions were answered incorrectly. If a student left any question blank, there'd be an S. And if a student didn't reach all the questions, these unreached questions at the end of the section would be marked as with an N. ISEE sections are ordered by difficulty, except for the reading section, and the score report reflects this. Thus, for the first question within a subsection would be the easiest one, and the last section would be the hardest. Score reports show whether students missed easy questions towards the beginning of the section or harder questions towards the end. So how do schools use the ISEE scores? Students apply from many different schools, so the best way to compare applicants is with a standardized test like the ISEE. However, it's really important to keep in mind that there are many parts to an application. The ISEE scores are just one of those. You also have things like the school transcript, teacher recommendations, application essays, extracurricular activities, and more. With all that being said, however, we have seen that lower scores can be an obstacle to admission, especially for competitive schools that receive a large number of applications. So while it is by no means the only metric used for admissions, it is, definitely something to pay attention to. And the best way to analyze your scores is in the context of the schools you're applying to, because the scores schools typically accept differ from school to school. Our website has data on score ranges that have historically made students competitive applicants at different schools. These are designed to provide directional information, but are by no means absolute. So being in the green range does not guarantee acceptance, nor does being in the red range guarantee rejection. I will send the link to the target scores page in the email follow-up with the recording. Now let's talk about some frequently asked questions that we get about scores. First of all, how soon will I receive my score report? So you will be able to see your score report within 2 weeks of your test date for paper tests and within 5 days for online tests. To access your scores, you'll log into your ERV account. Can I see the scores before sending it to schools? Yes. So if you test or if you may test more than once, we recommend that you wait until you see the score reports before sending them to schools. That way you can decide which test you want to send. So if you take it at first and you're not quite happy with your scores, you can take it again, and then you'd send the better scores. So when you register for your test, you don't have to select score recipients. Instead, you can add the recipients anytime free of charge through your ERV account. If I test more than once, can I send only the best scores for each section? So this is commonly known as super scoring. And no, you may not. So though some schools may choose to do this as they receive student score reports, the admissions office will be able to see the complete score report for each test you choose to send. So you cannot just choose, a verbal section from a fall test and a quantitative section from a winter test. You'd have to send the complete score report for each. Is the essay section scored? No, it is not. So instead, a copy of your essay is sent along with your score report to the schools you have elected to send your score report to. So it's not given a score, but the essay section is very important because it's used by the admissions team to help them assess your writing skills. So while you don't receive a score for it, it is still an important part of the evaluation for the schools. Will my score report show that I tested with accommodations? No, score reports do not indicate whether the test was taken with accommodations. So if you do have accommodations, you don't have to worry about those being part of your score report. Another question we sometimes get is, why are my ISEE scores lower than my usual standardized test scores? So ISEE test takers tend to be high performers, and a 50th percentile score means that you're testing right in the middle of this talented pack. So it's a more limited audience that takes the ISEE, and everyone who's taking the test, they tend to be high performers. So your scores may be lower than a typical standardized test score because it's a more limited audience taking it, and it's a more limited audience with high performers. Finally, how long are scores valid? So scores are valid through the current testing year, which is August 1st through July 31st. All right, do we have any questions today? If you do, please feel free to type them in the Q&A. And if I don't get to the questions today, I will follow up with you via email. Okay, so if we don't have any questions today, please feel free to contact us anytime at support@testinnovators.com, or give us a call at 1-800-280-1857. We're here 7 days a week, so we can always answer questions for you via email or over the phone. Please check out our site at ISEEpracticetest.com. And I also recommend checking out our free ISEE prep guide. It has everything you need to know about the test, as well as tips and strategies for each section. So I will send a link to our ISEE prep guide in the email with the webinar recording. Thank you all so much for joining us today. That's all for now, but we hope to hear from you soon. Have a lovely day.